Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and program stream at windowsontheworld.net. Welcome to the show, Windows on the World. Tonight we're going to have quite a few things of interest to everybody. And interestingly, I think that there's a big PR disaster looming for the regeneration of the UK. We're going to get into that. We've got Sandy Adams here. She's got some great information as well tonight. And also we're going to be looking at the psychology of climate change. Yes, climate anxiety is a recognised condition, but not an illness, because obviously the Psychological Society want more and more people to be diagnosed so they can be counselled out of their climate anxiety and grief for the end of the world. And we're going to get into that a bit later. But first of all, something of interest to everybody. It could be one of the biggest Agenda 21 PR disasters ever. Agenda 21 is what is responsible for the regeneration and the gentrification of your local, or what they call community. And basically it's the rebuilding of all infrastructure and the closing of roads and the control and management system which is going to be put in of the sort of 5G surveilled cities, Internet of Things type scenario, which a lot of people are talking about. But what they're not talking about is how it all really fits together. If we've got time tonight, I'm going to go into some of the 5G stuff. We've got a show coming up on that and how local councils are handling it. In other words, what I've been looking at is the implementation of the 5G infrastructure. Some people seem to be kind of a bit confused about that. So I've been putting some documentation together, which people have been sending into the show. So it's all from your local councils. In the meantime, I'm going to ask Sandy what she's been up to and what she's got for us tonight.
Oh, hi, Mark. Yeah, it's been interesting. I got something sent to me by our good friend Justin Walker a couple of days ago. And it's regarding the Paris Climate Conference that was in July 2015, ran from the 7th to the 10th. And he sent me this transcript, really, of questions that were asked to Professor Tim Lenton at the University of Exeter. And it's quite interesting because it looks as though he answered some questions, literally admitting to geoengineering projects. And first of all, he was asked a question by somebody from the Climate Change Sense.org, and it's Chemtrails Project UK. And she said, I represent a large group of people who are wondering why programmes such as weather modification and ongoing geoengineering programmes throughout the world have not been taken into consideration with a lot of the research done. And we notice on a daily basis that our environment is being tipped through aerosols being dumped into the atmosphere, blocking our sun. And she then says that, you know, there's aluminium being put into the atmosphere and it's destroying the bees and all this sort of thing. And she's saying basically aluminium is found in Wales, which is putting into, you know, and there's EMFs which are in the cell phone towers and HARP. And basically she's saying, you know, have you done any research and published anything on the tipping points that this is doing and will cause in the future? And he said, not precisely on those interventions, but I'm someone who's obviously worked on tipping points. So at first he sort of denies it, but then later Dr. Colin Pritchard at Edinburgh University says, my question again for Tim is, Thank you very much for your very cogent explanation. I would basically agree with you on geoengineering, except may I infer that you would prefer an enormous global-scale uncontrolled experiment in geoengineering as opposed to a small-scale uncontrolled one? At the moment we are in the former, and it seems to be a little bit bizarre to prefer the former to the latter. And then he kind of spills the beans. He says, I'm certainly not preferring carrying on with our current uncontrolled experiment, and I'm not... what is the right word? I'm not monolithically set against things that are being discussed under the banner of geoengineering. But I think we can perhaps all agree that certainly none of us want to continue the current uncontrolled experiment. I guess, knowing the numbers, we realise that it would take the strongest mitigation efforts possible. But we now know that additional things, including carbon removal from the atmosphere, we may want to develop that capability because we may need it as part of risk management portfolio for the future. So not only is he admitted blocking out the sun because of global warming, but he's also saying that they're trying to sequester CO2 from the atmosphere. I mean, how can they do that? There's not very much up there, is there, Mark?
Well, not really enough, according to people who've studied it. And the thing about the whole of the geoengineering program is that there's a mixture of information and disinformation, which often gets put together. In other words, it becomes like a counterintelligence kind of exercise. People go, oh, they're spraying us and they're doing all this. And there's kind of different avenues to the whole geoengineering program. I've been looking at it for a very long time. In fact, the first show I ever did at that People's Voice, which was a TV station years ago, started out in 2013, I think. We actually covered that on my first show, and I gathered as much information as I could about geoengineering, including the document which refers to geoengineering, and it's called the Regulation of Geoengineering. I think it came out in 2009. And that's available to look at. You can just download that. So they were openly talking about that. Now, the whole point of these programs is that there seems to be different ones depending on who you talk to. Now, I was convinced that it was going on a mass scale from about 2010. Now I'm finding it rather confusing. People who make blanket statements about it are usually not doing it any good either. And when I looked into it, I found that the high aluminium in the soil was quite common. So they were finding this particular aluminium. However, I can't say that any of this is conclusive, and I haven't come across anybody who's got a conclusive view. I've been looking at people like the Carnicom Institute over the years, and some of this stuff gets quite technical, and some of it is very difficult to actually nail down. Now, the thing is that there is a program going on. This was admitted to us at Oxford University about 6-7 years ago, and David Keith, the geoengineer who's all for this global dimming and also the rollout of sulfur dioxide being sprayed into the atmosphere, was there, and he was talking about it, and he's really like something out of a dystopian movie. He seems very detached from reality, and we were told that this was going to happen. It had been approved. So none of this is kind of secret, and it's not denied. It's interesting what you're saying, that they've started the carbon sequestration. I think that's what they call it, isn't it?
Yeah. But what's interesting is that none of this has been taken in consideration with any of the IPCC manipulated models. Yes. That's one thing that really... should be looked at, because this guy has clearly said, yes, we're doing it. So if they are, he clearly says they are. So he's, I mean, it just seems to me that none of this has been taken into account when we're looking at climate models, and it should be.
Well, it's interesting because we've found out that there has been an increase that's been put onto global temperatures of around 2.5 degrees. And this is an overall thing, and this has been found out through the data, mainly the surface temperature data. The satellite data is a lot more reliable, but they're using a lot of surface data for the IPCC reports, and that last IPCC report was criticised very, very heavily because their surface data was very poorly put together, to say the least.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at this, even the scientists who actually criticise the IPCC don't take into account geoengineering. So you've got a good point. But whether this is actually affecting the temperature of the planet is difficult to prove with the data that we're getting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, climate is such a complicated subject, and to narrow it down to anthropogenic global warming is just, beyond stupid, actually, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's really stupid to leave the sun out of the equation when it comes to warming as well, which is what the IPCC do. But the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was set up to actually prove that anthropogenic global warming was happening and it was real. It wasn't set up independently. It was set up on that premise. In other words, that we're warming the planet, so what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
That's how it was set up.
Yeah.
So it wasn't set up as an independent body. And when people say this stuff about 97% of scientists, it's all complete nonsense. And when you look into what the IPCC actually is, it's a lobbying body for the United Nations, was set up in 1990, well, it was set up from the 1992 Earth Summit Conference, and it came into being about 96, didn't it, I think? Or 98?
98.
98, yes. It was talked about in 96, came about in 98.
Yeah.
Yes, but the whole thing is all linked together. Now, this is a point I wanted to bring up, that people seem to be concentrating on 5G. 5G is about the Internet of Things. It's about the smart city agenda. It's about a much bigger agenda than just 5G. So we need to look at the whole, and the whole of it is how the whole of society is being re-engineered, how cities are going to be made into smart cities, how people are going to be stopped from using cars, forced into driverless and electric cars. All this sort of stuff is what 5G is about. It's about the Internet of Things, and it's about a control and management structure, which is at the moment being put in. So that is part of a control and management system. Yeah. And the thing is about it that local councils, we've now found out, have, well, let's be kind and say very little input. I would say none whatsoever, due to my experiences and through the documentation I've been looking at over the last week. Because the documentation and the implementation that is being brought in for new cell towers and new 5G infrastructure directly goes over the heads of all your local councils. They have nothing to do with it whatsoever. The contracts were signed in 2017, and that's another issue that needs to be looked at. For instance, in Waltham Forest, this area of northeast London I used to live in, 16,500 of these hubs went in just after 2017. Arqiva put them in. So the point of this is really the local authority, as in the Agenda 21 policies, which is the re-engineering of your local town, city or village. They have very little to do with it. This comes from above the council, and they merely implement it on behalf of the third party. Yeah. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's important to know. I mean, I take my hat off to anyone who's campaigning locally, and I would still, continue to do that, because your voices have to be heard. But just know that a lot of the infrastructure, the town councils have no jurisdiction over at all.
I'm going to do a show on this, yeah.
Particularly the LED street lamps.
I've got a lot of information on that that's been set in. Thanks to everyone who's been sending this stuff in, because I never make blanket sweeping statements on this show. It's all based on fact, and basically the information has come from councils all over the country, and it's a template being rolled out. And this documentation that we're going to talk about probably in the next show, because I'd like to go through it, basically removes a lot of the local authority planning which would be necessary for cell towers. It kind of removes that completely, even from towers that are sited on roads. So I don't think we'll have time to go into that on today's show, but certainly I'm going to be doing a show on that over the next couple of weeks. I've got all the information ready now. So that's really interesting. But yeah, we're going to get on to the biggest Agenda 21 PR disaster possibly ever, which is incredibly funny. Now, it's been organised by this organisation, this group called Livable Streets. Now, all of this is to do with closing down roads, getting rid of cars, building these surveilled gulags with coffee shops and a gym, with its own local command and control centre or community hub.
What street isn't livable then? I mean, most people live in streets, don't they?
It's a little bit like Enrico Giovanni at the Global Governance Summit saying that Agenda 21 sustainable development means everything and nothing.
Yeah.
These terms do not have to mean anything. And the terms are actually more powerful if they don't mean anything, because nobody knows what they mean.
No.
And everyone says, well, livable, that sounds acceptable, doesn't it? If livable streets is a Tower Hamlets programme. Now, it's not a Tower Hamlets programme. It's a programme that goes into 17 London boroughs. And now it's gone into Oxford, interestingly. And that's where the connection with Waltham Forest is, one of the boroughs which implemented the draconian measures of Agenda 21 with no consultation and with the use of one primary change agent and cabinet member for the environment, who I have actually interacted with quite a lot over the years. And he planted into Oxford to do a talk on livable streets for Oxford, one of the most unpopular characters in the whole of Waltham Forest. And then what they're going to do is they're going to have a coach trip a couple of days later. On the 19th, this meeting's on the 15th of October, on the 19th, they're going to take a coach party on a livable streets tour to Waltham Forest. I just hope they don't encounter any of the locals.
Because the locals weren't too happy about
They
what
weren't.
happened
They carried
in
a
Waltham
coffin
Forest.
through the village because they destroyed the village. However, and that was called Walthamstow Village, but this is called the City Villages Project. So the reason they chose that one to start with, I think, was because it is a village. It was called a village, but then it became Black Horse Village, Mark House Village. They all became villages, you see. Because villages sound great, don't they? They don't sound like surveilled gulags, really, do they? They sound like they've got a little green. But when you get there, it's quite different, quite different. You know, all the roads are closed, tree planters in all the roads. You can't get anywhere. The main arterial roads are cut off from most of the side roads.
Oh, that's because you'll never want to leave, Mark.
Yes, we've got to get rid of these rat runs. But Livable Streets is a programme designed to enhance livability across the borough through improving public spaces, changing traffic conditions and discouraging antisocial behaviour. It didn't work in Waltham Forest. Stabbings and violent crimes gone through the roof since they started implementing the gentrification or the Agenda 21 policies. So it says these improvements will be determined by community feedback. That's a lie.
Yeah.
That's a flat-out lie. No, they will be determined by the UN Global Action Plan, which Clyde Lokes, who is the useful idiot who's implemented this in Waltham Forest and is now being invited to Oxford, stated was a conspiracy theory. Interestingly, we're going to get onto that in a minute. It says, we want to hear from as many people as possible to best represent the wants and needs of the community in our designs. What that means is they will be looking for the people who are going to support the implementation. Anyone who doesn't will be left out of the surveys and they will be marginalised at the meetings where they'll be using Delphi technique with facilitators and co-facilitators. And everyone's now finding out about this, aren't they? That this is how your local meetings are run. So people come in from outside the area, as they did at the Elephant and Castle regeneration scheme, which covers from Old Kent Road to Peckham. And they said, we've got our facilitators and co-facilitators, we're going to split you up into groups and we're going to ask you what you want to see. And if you don't like more cycling, yours gets thrown in the bin and you'll never see us facilitators again because we don't work for the council and the plans have already been pushed through. They've already been signed for. So it's a facade. So it says 17 areas across the borough have been identified for development. Consultation and engagement has already begun for 5 of these schemes: Bow, Wapping, Bethnal Green, Barkentine and Brick Lane. Okay, so let's now go on to a show that we did about 1.5 years ago, which I sent to Councillor and Cabinet Member for the Environment and the enforcer of Agenda 21 policies, Clyde Lokes. We made a show called London's Dystopia, Public Winning Fight Back, which featured housing officers and people who knew what they were talking about, including Gordon Peters, who'd taken down the Haringey development vehicle, which was where Lend-Lease came in and took over half the infrastructure of Haringey. In other words, the council became a partner and they became a lesser partner to an international corporation who manage infrastructure. That's what this whole agenda is about. It's the takeover of all infrastructure which affects the livelihood of people. But they're not going to tell you that because you still think that those idiots who sit on the local town council have anything to do with this, and they don't. It's always good fun to harangue them, though, and make the public aware that these people are powerless puppets. Livable streets, yes. So what happened was, at this meeting held by locals, it was all about the regeneration and the taking over of infrastructure, the people losing their council tenancies and also losing any rights to park their cars if they disagreed with losing their homes, basically long term, right? Yeah. So if you don't want these regeneration plans for your local estate, which will mean that you lose your tenancy, then you don't get a place to park. So this is how it goes, you see.
So you're being punished. It's the original sin of owning cars.
Well, you have one choice, no choice. There is no salvation outside of Agenda 21.
Absolutely. It's just like, what's it called? Unum Sanctum.
That's right, the Papal Bull of 1302, which put the world in trust to the Holy Roman Empire.
Yes.
Every human creature will be subservient to the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen. That's the updated version.
Yes, unfortunately.
However, this is very interesting because this could really backfire on them. Now, what happened was, when I sent Councillor and Cabinet Member for the Environment, Clyde Lokes, the show about people's concerns as to what was actually happening, he wrote back to me, obviously without listening to it, and said, "Thank you for your email and taking the time to contact me. However, as I don't subscribe to the hugely discredited and laughable conspiracy theories that suggest there is an Agenda 21 takeover of the world, I'm afraid I find it of no value whatsoever. Yours, Clyde." Now, the point was, I wrote back a very long response to that, challenging him to a public debate in front of the people that he stated that he actually represented. Of course, there was no reply to that one. But also I asked him which of the 42 chapters of Agenda 21 was a conspiracy theory. No response to any of that. Now, the thing is about this, let's look at it, because does Clyde Lokes, Cabinet Member of the Environment, who implemented the agendas policies of Agenda 21, know about Agenda 21? Yes, he does. However, he believes that these policies are coming through central government. He doesn't believe clearly that they're coming through the UN, or if he does know they're coming through the UN, which he should do, because UN Agenda 21 policies have been embedded in every local council in the country since 1998. Right? They've been there because we've got the documentation. Well, let's go back to this. It says about this implementation. And this is what they've said about Clyde Lokes, who's now been sent to Oxford to try and get the people of Oxford on board with the gulag, which is Waltham Forest. Okay, Waltham Forest Borough Councillor Clyde Lokes speaks on implementing livability. Now, bear in mind they've changed the name of this now. It's not called sustainable development. They're calling it livability.
Livability.
So they're changing
nothing.
what the original name, which was being pushed on the public, is all about. So, livability sounds very bland. Councillor Lokes is a deputy leader of the Waltham Forest Borough Council, who's Cabinet Member for the Environment. See how useful idiots rise through the ranks, don't they?
They do, even though whatever they do is discredited, and the people in the communities hate what they've done.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Well, we've got a video that I show at our talks, The Bigger Picture, and it clearly shows people haranguing him. And then when they're haranguing him, he does what every change agent does. He starts talking to an 8-year-old kid and saying, "Isn't it great that you can bring your bike here now? Nobody can get in. No one can get a delivery. The fire brigade and the ambulances can't get in. But you can ride your bike up and down the road. Isn't it wonderful?" He will be speaking about the experience of Waltham Forest in implementing Britain's first comprehensive low-traffic neighbourhood scheme. Well, what it means is a no-traffic neighbourhood scheme. Well, it means traffic on 2 main roads, which are clogged all day because they closed all the other roads where people live, and they called them rat runs. They put big tree planters in there, and it looked temporary, but it became permanent with no public consultation. So in Oxford, if you want to have all your roads closed with no public consultation, listen to Mr. Lokes. So, yes, says the scheme is part of a larger set of livability improvements called Enjoy Waltham Forest. Enjoy it! You have to enjoy it, don't you? This is the implementation of the Mini Holland funds provided by Transport for London. Well, it wasn't. It came through Transport for London, and Transport for London, who were meant to be implementing the survey along with Waltham Forest, one of their agents told me that the borough was 65% in favour before the public consultation. Quite amazing, isn't it, how they do this? They roll it in quickly. Mini Holland funds were available to any Outer London borough that was willing to implement a swathe of livability improvements. Can you see the language? Are you getting used to it yet? Of which low-traffic neighbourhoods were a key component. 18 bid for the funds, 3 bids were accepted, and only Waltham Forest has delivered the ambitious programmes attached to them. Go and have a word with some of the local businesses that are still there about what they think about it. Ask them what they feel about it, you know. Not too happy, because basically if you're not Starbucks or one of the big chain stores, you're not going to be there for much longer. Most businesses have gone now. Waltham Forest has been fated for this programme, receiving over 100 delegations from across the UK, useful idiots bust in and out, who are then going to implement it everywhere else on an expenses day, and probably weekend or whatever. They just get the useful idiots in, they retrain them into sustainability or now livability, and there you go. They're going to appear in your local town, city and village, and there's nothing you can do about it unless you kick them out. So it says here that on the 19th, this is on the 15th, they're going to have this consultation with Mr. Lokes in Oxford, the livability scheme. And then on the 19th, there's a coach trip to Waltham Forest. Join us for a guided walkabout. Well, you can't drive, can you? So it's got to be a walkabout.
Why would you do that on your day off? Get on a coach from Oxford and go to Waltham Forest.
Well, I think these might be the agents of change.
Oh, they're probably sort of... Yeah,
I think they're specially selected.
Training them up, yeah.
Specially selected people,
so they
I think,
can go
will be
and
on it.
spread the word about how wonderful it is.
That's right. Join us for a guided walkabout, taking in the highlights of the remarkable changes introduced in the borough of Waltham Forest. Well, they are remarkable. They were done with no public consultation. They've closed everywhere off, and now you've got cell towers everywhere, right outside these new gulag flats that they've built. And you have armies of cyclists, and that's about all.
And it destroys, any kind of pedestrianisation destroys the local communities. And this has been proven that businesses fail apart from the corporates that go in.
That's right, because they come in on the back of the schemes. So they're brought in with the redevelopment, basically. So they're not really like local businesses or anything like that.
Local businesses fail. Yeah.
Yes, the main thing
and
about
that's the
this
whole
is,
idea,
yes,
isn't it?
It is, because they want corporate infrastructure because it's controlled.
Yeah.
So they don't want people getting together and discussing how bad things are, do they?
No.
It just wouldn't work.
No. There's various schemes to try and pedestrianise Glastonbury, and I would oppose it. They bang on about it in the council all the time about how it should be pedestrianised.
Yes, I wonder who put that into their highly inactive and minuscule brains. Yes, but this says here, now this is a Facebook page, by the way, called Livable Streets. Look at it on Facebook. It says, come and see what all the fuss is about. Waltham Forest has been fated with several awards for its bold changes to neighbourhood infrastructure. Now, who gave them the awards? Well, wait a minute.
Themselves.
They did.
Newsflash.
News just in. They gave them to themselves. It has received over 100 delegations from the UK and further afield seeking to learn from its experience. And most of them are still there because they can't find their way out.
Yeah, it's just like a maze.
It's unbelievable. That's why I sold up and got out of Waltham Forest. I knew what was coming. And the people who stayed there thought I was a conspiracy theorist. Well, they don't think that now that their property's worth about half the amount and they can't move and get out. So... about time that we moved on to something more important, the climate emergency, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's time for the climate emergency, and we're going to hear from David Actabor and Greta Thunderbird, the sister of Greta.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Climate emergency. I know it's turned out nice again, but worse is to come. Welcome to this... the sixth mass extinction, the apocalypse. Our planet is dying, but it is still not too late if we stop flying, driving, and breathing out.
It's never too late to stop lying, David. Did you know that kids all over the world are having school strikes and demanding you stop lying?
Oh, Greta, sister of Greta Thunderbird. You're banned from the set of Climate Matters. How did you manage to get in?
I have friends in high places, David. Your producer is producing my new show.
Oh, what's it called?
Exposing the climate Lies of the BBC and David Attenborough.
That's Sir David Attenborough, actually.
You will have that title removed soon, David. I even told the Queen about your lying. My sister is home now, and I have been telling her all about you too.
Oh, please say hello to St. Greta the Great, our inspiration in the last days of this, Mother Gaia, our planet, our beautiful home.
It's been here billions of years, David, and unlike you, it's not going anywhere. I have been getting all the surface and satellite climate data, along with the balloon data too, from all weather stations on the planet.
Oh, you're on the side, that side of science now, thank goodness.
Yes, David, I am. And I can now prove you. The IPCC and the BBC are lying. You are a fraud. It's all over for you. You're going to have to disappear now.
Oh, I won't be doing that. I've got a new mass extinction series, and in the new year, another series of climate matters, plus lots of after-dinner work and special guest slots on numerous international TV shows.
Well, wherever you go, I will be there. We Thunderbirds demand you to tell the truth. Act now or else. My sister is being deprogrammed after being on that UN yacht too. We are now stalking you, and your producer is now my producer. This is what we Thunderbirds do. We take over everything.
So as the last ice melts in the poles and the Earth mourns the loss of another natural habitat, it looks like I, Sir David Attenborough, may also soon be extinct.
Welcome to the Climate Matters with me, Greta Thunderbird. Following the departure of David Attenborough, I will be presenting the show from now on.
It's Sir David, if you don't mind.
Well, I do actually. Remove this man from the set. He works for the BBC. He's a UN globalist puppet.
OK, take me to the Maldives. I can report on sea levels and the loss of our beautiful planet from there. Nice weather too.
Stop lying! There is no sea level rise.
There must be a climate catastrophe somewhere.
Oh, stop it.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
It's getting better and better all the time. Climate matters there. And now let's get on to a quote from Greta Thunberg. I think we could start using some of her quotes for ourselves because they were obviously written and they're quite effective, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay, so the first one is, say this to your local council. Say this to anyone who's opposing the rights of you. We will not let you get away with this. Right here, right now is where we draw the line. The world is waking up and change is coming, whether you like it or not.
That should be our quote. Hang
Well,
on.
that's right.
Yeah.
I know. Say it at the next council climate meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, the world is waking up to the UN puppet show. Greta Thunberg has overdone the acting, really, hasn't she?
Oh, she's really shot herself in the foot, hasn't she? Yeah.
Well, somewhere, yeah. She's shown she really doesn't have a clue after all. But we've got something else to look into now. This is a press briefing, European Climate Declaration. And it's from over 500 real science experts. It's quite an interesting paper, actually. And it's been sent to Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary-General, plus a lot of the other, well, let's call them delegates or useful idiots. And it says there is no climate emergency, say 500 experts. Climate summit begins in New York, it says here. A new high-level global network of 500 prominent climate scientists and professionals has submitted a declaration that there is no climate emergency. The group has sent a European climate declaration with a registered letter to Antonio Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations. Professor Gus Berkhout of the Netherlands, who organised the declaration, said, "So popular is the declaration with scientists and researchers worldwide that signatories are flooding in not only from within Europe, but also from other countries such as the United States and Canada, Australia and New Zealand." The group's letter warns the UN that the general circulation models of climate on which international policy is at present founded are unfit for purpose. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
The declaration adds that the models which have predicted far more warming than they should, and there's a diagram to show you that on this paper, are not remotely plausible as policy tools. Not remotely plausible as policy tools. So everything that we've been talking about so far, in other words, the redesigning and re-engineering of your local environment, the livability plans, the sustainable development plans, are based on something that is not remotely plausible. So they have no excuse, really, do they?
No. No, I mean, the science is there, isn't it? And more, we're seeing in the mainstream media, or not in the mainstream media, on the non-mainstream media. The BBC is still pushing the whole narrative of climate change, but so much more. I'm finding that people are coming forward and saying, you know, this is a lie, and with the data to prove it. So yeah, it's changing. I think the tide's turning, to be honest.
Yeah, you can't keep overdoing it like that. It's going to fail because propaganda has to have some truth in it. And when you've got this Greta Thunberg rallying now and making these quite absurd statements, really.
Yeah, I mean, to get hysterical and start really laying into the she's a United Nations puppet, and she's addressing them and throwing a tantrum, and that isn't doing her any favours at all. And also, it was interesting. She was actually asked a question the other day. And she didn't have a script, and she could not function. It was as though somebody had switched her off. And, you know, it's obvious that without a script, she's hopeless. So she is actually completely controlled. And I feel sorry for her, because God knows what she's going to be like in years to come. Her mental health isn't good now. So it really is child abuse. And the fear that's being instilled into our children nationally, well, globally, is ridiculous, where they're actually wanting to have counselling because they're so traumatised by the fact that the world is going to end very soon. This is nonsense, and it's got to stop. It's not fair on the children.
No, we might get onto that a bit later if we've got time, but we've still got quite a lot to get through here. It says they exaggerate the effect of greenhouse gases such as CO2 and ignore the fact that enriching the atmosphere with CO2 is beneficial. The climate emergency that never was, it says here, global warming predicted by climate models is 3 times warming expected on the basis of officially estimated man-made influences. Now, this is on the back of the IPCC reports themselves, right?
Yeah.
So really this is quite interesting, because this is the whole manipulation of even the IPCC data by people like Extinction Rebellion. They've completely misinterpreted. So in other words, when this catastrophobia takes over, people exaggerate it because they want more catastrophe.
Yeah, they do. And it's like a hysteria, really, isn't it? It's hysteria. It's climate hysteria.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at group psychology and how you can actually implement this hysterical reaction, it's actually quite simple to do. You only have to look at a group of people and look how panic sets in.
Yeah.
If you get a group of people where they think something's happened, that mass panic sets in quite quickly.
Yeah.
So this is all quite psychologically worked out. And yes, we've now got the Climate Psychology Alliance, which we might get onto a little bit later.
That's quite interesting.
It's very interesting. But basically, this paper is available, and I would recommend anyone download it, actually. Let's see what it's called. I've got it here. It's from Professor Goose Burkhout, and it's GUUS.BERKHOUT. That's GUUS, not W, U2Us. G2US BERKHOUT at clintel.org. Now, clintel.org is the website, so it's clintel, KLINTEL.org. And it says there is no climate emergency. It's an interesting paper. It's very, very simple and very, very short. It says there is no climate emergency, therefore there is no cause for panic and alarm.
Yeah.
We strongly oppose the harmful and unrealistic net zero CO2 policy proposed for 2050. If better approaches emerge, we will have ample time to reflect and adapt. The aim of international policy should be to provide the reliable and affordable energy at all times and throughout the world. So they're trying to bring a voice of reason in. And these are very, very well qualified scientists, unlike a lot of the people who actually contribute to the UN IPCC papers. They are not specialists in the science of climate, which is quite interesting and unknown to most of the public, who just say scientists agree.
Yeah.
What sort of scientists agree? That's always worth asking, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yes, we've now got agents of climate change. They're infiltrating everywhere. and it's called the Climate Psychology Alliance. And in identifying the problem, we must look at who is controlling or attempting to control narratives. Now, the control we're talking about works at every level, and we're talking about the use of change agents, people who come in and change on the back of an agenda. And psychologists at every level are embedded with change agents into all areas. So we're not just talking about the climate change area. So that's something to be taken into consideration. Belief must turn into the reality as experienced by the new model citizen, the one they're trying to create. And the climate change religion has spawned a huge parasitical group of willing propagandists who will use every possible method to bend the public will into the intended outcome on behalf of the World Bank and the UN at the top level, and it is they who control the climate. So let's hear about climate change agents. We're going to get into that now. We're going to look at this Climate Psychology Alliance. Look it up. Climate Psychology Alliance. Now, following the creation of climate anxiety through the media and a global business plan, which is actually what it is, which has been rebranded from global warming to climate change, this organisation, the Climate Psychology Alliance, links into global governance through fake green groups, the IPCC, of course, numerous NGOs pushing catastrophobia as a religion for profit. But first, let's look at the fringe clown show which is associated with the neurosis industry, whose latest condition, well, not an illness, we can't say it's an illness, can we? Because we want everyone to have it.
Yes, and we want to get lots of money by sort of, setting up counselling people so that they can actually get rid of their anxiety about climate change.
Climate anxiety. It is not defined as an illness because it needs to spread for the taxation and control scam to be implemented. That's the main reason, right? However, the parasitical world of psychology, that's my opinion, by the way, is ready to make a few bob out of counselling those in fear of the weather, CO2, and all loosely associated subjects like whales who eat plastic and walruses that fall off cliffs. Now, listen to the biography of one of the associates of the Climate Psychology Alliance. Now, they're going around here. They're linked in to these big funded globalist NGOs. Yeah. So this is going to be a big thing, boys and girls. You're going to find that your local storytellers aren't just going to be the LBGT community, if that exists, right? Those ones that they have going around nursery schools. Well, you're going to have people who are doing climate change storytelling, okay? And it's mixed in with kind of mythical stuff and very vague allegorical stories. So let's have a look at one of these clowns who's trying to weave stories around the climate change business and make some money. She says, I am a storyteller based in London. This is all part of this Climate Psychology Alliance, okay? And they interconnect with all these different groups. So this one says, I'm a storyteller based in London. I co-run the North London Traditional Storytelling Circle. Sounds very innocuous, doesn't it? I tell stories in schools, libraries, at festivals, and at many different and diverse venues. Oh, diverse. And a variety of different occasions. Well, I bet the venues are diverse only in that they're all the same in a vibrant community sort of way, I facilitate workshops on personal and professional development using story, and I work with individuals who wish to explore story as an aid to, wait for it, facilitating environmental and social change.
Yeah. Well,
why is it that they are all cardboard cutouts of each other, these people?
Well, it's like a big spider web, isn't it?
Of a template that's all the same.
A template that, exactly. It's really, really disturbing, actually. Yeah.
Oh, so there is an agenda. So she's a storyteller who goes around schools, but she's facilitating environmental and social change. A bit like Gail Bradbrook and all these other useful template cardboard cutout idiots. Yeah. Many of us don't know what to do, she says. Well, she clearly doesn't because she's doing this. But nonetheless, feel the pain of loss as the world around us changes. Well,
the world has always changed.
Yes,
get over it.
I think so. I think she's kind of missing the bigger picture here, isn't she?
Yes.
Anyone who links together story cliches with climate really has nothing better to do, in my opinion. But maybe this agent hates 20 miles per hour zones and cycle lanes and template smart cities with surveilled gulags of single occupancy flats. But I doubt that's what she means, really.
No, you see, the trouble is that these useful idiots have no idea what they're pushing. And if they do, then we really need to worry even more, because I don't. Do you think these useful idiots know what they're pushing? They're just happy to be doing something that they think is environmentally good, and they get a pay packet for it.
Because of the mantras that they repeat, I don't think they do know what they're doing, because they're using these same terms as each other without really defining what they mean, and they use them in strategic places, in paragraphs, all over. They do this all over. It's the same thing. It's like, not again. I mean, can't they change it a little bit? No, they can't. These people must have no brain whatsoever.
No, exactly.
However, it says, trying to articulate and work with the story of our times seems to me to be a very worthwhile endeavour. I am interested in working with individuals or groups who see themselves or would like to see themselves as agents of change. They can't leave it alone, can they?
No.
They just can't leave it alone. They can't be natural for 1 minute, So it is now clear that we are listening to a drone, a change agent who is being used to implement the New World System. Yes, it started with the Big Society in 2010, but she's looking to recruit more drones for global change, more indoctrinated hive mind believers of anything they hear from the UN and its organisations and think tanks. That's not my opinion, that's a fact. So she's a mentor for hive mind consensus. It means we're going to make it look as though everyone agrees, because our little group of change agents is going to be the people who everyone listens to. That's how it works. More indoctrinated hive mind believers of anything. That's what they are. They hear from the UN and its organisations and think tanks, and that's where they're getting all this from. So, yes, basically, she says, I offer individual coaching and group workshops. Now, the terminally brainwashed, brainwashing the ineffective and willingly brainwashed, that's what's going on here, through social change, which is the main aim of the new Global Action Plan. Now, I've looked at organisations who are subverting public opinion through programmes of change for about 10 years now, and they're all the same template. You will see the same thing.
Over
it
and over
never,
again.
ever changes.
And they're mentored into it. And also there is this thing about appealing to authority, because if they know that their particular NGO or whatever has actually got funding from the UN, they think, oh, that's really good. The UN's a really good, body, don't they? So they think they're doing a really good thing.
Well, they're in a hierarchical organisation,
Exactly,
so the UN are a hierarchy, and they sound great, don't they? I would love to be working for the UN, So let's see what this agent of change is pushing then. Here's the story that she's taking round schools. It's called The Light in the Stone. And it's a spellbinding tale of ancient light and sacred secrets weaving together spoken word and music. There's plenty of cliches to get your teeth into there. Here we have the reference to the luciferic light. This is quite interesting, as it goes on, which the New Agers flock to, usually before they descend into narcissism, channeling and delusion, which brings them into mental illness where their needs are met by the psychologists who are telling them this crap in the first place. That's my interpretation of what's going on.
And they achieve the lostness of the mind. Yeah.
This is what they wanted us to have, and the thing that we haven't got because we've filled our minds with facts. Fill your mind with facts and don't lose your mind. Don't listen to Gail Bradbrook.
No.
Storyteller, Miss Change Agent, then says, the story weaves together tales from the 3 Abrahamic religions, drawing from the oral traditions, stories and legends of Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Now, wait a minute. What's she talking about? Oral traditions, right? This is quite interesting now, because then it starts going off into something else. Basically, weave together tales of 3 religions. Oh, that sounds like the one world religion from the UN, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Who would have thought? How did this get implanted in her inactive but highly impressionable brain, I wonder? Now, the story follows a stone containing primordial light. They love that word primordial, don't they? That's where everything started. It follows the story of a stone containing primordial light given to Adam and Eve by Raziel, the angel of mysteries. Now, this is interesting, right? Because Raziel in Hebrew means secret of God. And it's an archangel within the teachings of Kabbalah. So it's got nothing to do with any religion, right?
No.
It's got nothing to do with any religion. Kabbalah is not Judaism. Well, it's been accepted as part of Judaism by certain people. But Kabbalah is nothing to do with religion. It came out of the Languedoc in the 1200s. Basically, so it's a New Age thing, this, that she's going into. In Midrashic and magical literature, Raziel is mentioned only in sources going back to the esoteric teachings of the Talmudic period, okay? So it doesn't go back earlier than 400 AD. but then they're then saying it's only mentioned in the Kabbalah and there's references in the Talmud. So what we're dealing here with is not something that's great and about light. It could be just a demonic energy, right? So this is so typical of the New Age, isn't it? The irresponsibility of the terminology of what they're using. Yeah. That because they get into these vagaries and it's all mystery and it's all light, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, and what's this got to do with environmentalism anyway?
Well, this takes us into what we talk about in a way, doesn't it? Because we talk about how the New Age was mentored into the UN through Robert Mueller in the 70s and all of these kind of
and Maurice Strong with the
Bacca,
the Bacca Ranch in the 1980s, how he was bringing all these gurus to the Bacca, and he's a billionaire. He's a billionaire with an agenda to control via the United Nations the whole globe. So what they wanted was a one world religion, along with a one world government and a one world currency, or
which ironically,
society,
or by some kind of weird coincidence, is exactly what this woman's trying to bring in with her storytelling. Is there a connection? Is it a conspiracy theory, or has it been implanted into a highly inactive and minuscule brain?
Exactly.
So she's been reading lots of New Age stuff and is prone to vague, unqualified statements. Perfect for a high priestess of climate anxiety, I would say. She's a high priestess of climate anxiety working for the new organisation that we're talking about, the Climate Psychology Alliance.org.
It sounds something straight out of, all that lot up in London, the institute, what's it called? The one with the, your mind tells you lies.
Oh, you mean like that was on Whitecross Street? That's a Tavistock, near the Tavistock Institute.
Couldn't think of the Tavistock Institute. It sounds like something straight out of the Tavistock.
Well, they're
Institute.
very good at putting this kind of stuff together.
School.
Yeah. I mean, that we've covered in great detail. The Tavistock Institute and the social engineering.
But that sounds like something out of there, doesn't it?
Well, it absolutely is, because the British Psychological Association is in that building.
Yeah.
Along with the Economic and Social Research Council. Yeah, I mean, the British Psychological Association are constantly putting out documents trying to counter people who are putting out truth.
Yeah.
Basically, so the British Psychological Association are working as a counter-intelligence agency. Right? Now, that's something that people just need to get their heads around. So the British Psychological Association and the Climate Psychology Alliance, in my opinion, are counterintelligence, right? That's what they're doing. They're trying to disprove what is real and prove what is not real, right? So it's all part of a program. But in other words, there has to be some truth in what they're saying, and there's actually less and less truth in anything they're saying, because in order for propaganda to work, it has to be a mixture of truth and lies.
Exactly.
Doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
But this is a great quote from a book, The Psychological Society by Martin L. Gross. I sometimes use this in the talk because it's such a great quote. It was written in 1979. It's a great book. I would recommend anybody read this book. The book was written by Martin L. Gross. It's called The Psychological Society is what it's called. Now, this is a quote. The citizens of the Psychological Society are the most anxious, emotionally insecure and analysed population in the history of mankind. A new model of Westerner, dependent on others as to what is real or false. Now, this is exactly what's happened, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Total dependency on an external authority for validation of your own thoughts.
Yeah.
It's an art, science, therapy, religion, moral code, lifestyle, philosophy and cult. Its professional minions number in the hundreds of thousands. Now, that was in 1979. We've got a few more since then, I think. As is obvious, the parasites of this establishment cult are always looking for new business angles and new illnesses, which is really what that book's about. It's about the creation of neurosis and then the creation of a business to absorb the neurosis. Not cure it, absorb it, because that's what the Psychological Society was all about. It's about diagnosing people but not curing them.
Because they don't want them cured, because they want the neurosis to spread so that they can actually bring in the agenda.
That's right. So the irrational fear of an impending catastrophe has been a useful tool for apocalyptic cults. The new corporate narcissistic cult called Extinction Rebellion uses the irrational fear in the most brainless fashion. See our show on that, actually, Extinction Rebellion, the facts. I listened to that the other day. It's actually very good. There's stuff in there I'd completely forgotten about, because this Extinction Rebellion nonsense has been going on well over a year now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
And look how much ground it's gained and how much money's been put behind it. It is not a grassroots movement. Everyone can see that now, I'm sure.
Yeah. Let's have a look at some of the other associations that is in line with the Climate Psychology Alliance. We've got someone called climateincome.org. Okay? They're petitioning for a carbon taxing credit system. So they're petitioning to get people enslaved. So you sign up to it and you basically get huge taxation and you get carbon credits rather than having to deal in money.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, this is all out of the technocracy movement,
right.
which Zabriskie brought back in the 1970s. The technocracy movement was in the 1930s. It was shelved and it was brought back into being under the new, what they called the new economic order, it was basically carbon, or energy taxing, as opposed to price-based economy. And that's what they're trying to push with the new Green Deal and bringing all this carbon taxing in, which will actually destroy all of our economies.
Yeah, the control of all energy and resources, the centralised system. But they describe themselves, this lot, climateincome.org, as a citizens' climate lobby.
Oh, how benign that sounds.
But why? They can never change, can it? We're going to have a citizens' assembly. We're going to have this,
Same old
the
template.
People's Assembly. The Citizens'
boring.
Climate Lobby. In other words, it's not the Citizens' Climate Lobby, right? Now, how are their agents going to make any money out of their therapies if everyone is in poverty through the Global Action Plan of carbon taxation as a credit system? Now, have they thought of this? Because if everyone's just living on carbon credits, how can they get treatment for the climate anxiety?
Exactly. The trouble is that they'll all be in poverty and neurosis. Now, how bad is that?
Exactly. It's going to be even worse than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
But basically, let's have a look at someone else. Now, they're also in with something called the Climate Coalition, which is again backed by massive finance. It's the UK's largest group of people dedicated to action on climate change. Is it? I've never heard of it, have you?
No.
I didn't know about this. And limiting its impact on the world's poorest communities. In other words, redistribution of wealth, right? CPA is a member of this group. Right, okay, so the Climate Psychology Alliance isn't just a load of wafflers who are trying to sell you therapy. It's backed by very big business because they know this climate anxiety thing is going to be rolled out.
It's like everything. Everything is monetised, everything, and financialised. Nature, people, neurosis, everything.
Yeah,
Yes.
so these psychologists are members of the Climate Coalition. So they're working for your enslavement through your climate anxiety. It's well thought out, this, isn't it?
It certainly is. Oh my goodness! It is a business plan. It's a global business plan, isn't it? Really, being literally rolled out at every single level.
Yeah.
Affecting every area of human life.
Yeah. There's another one that they're in league with called Climate Outreach, formerly COIN, coining it in. It's worked closely with the CPA. We value their research particularly into the best ways of communicating climate change. Now, this is the other thing they're doing, right?
That's it. Yes,
Climate
it's a PR
outreach,
job.
yes. It's useful idiots spouting the stuff that we've been talking about all night on the internet using webinars to recruit people. And they're going to instruct you on how to start conversations on climate change.
Yeah.
Because it's such a difficult topic. It's a topic we all shy away from, isn't it? And it's a topic that is so uncomfortable and so frightening for people that they need useful idiots to tell them how to talk about it.
Yeah.
They use climate engagement strategists. Can you believe this? Climate engagement strategists. It sounds like something out of 7-7 Brigade, doesn't it?
All these people, I mean, there's a price on all of this. Can you imagine how much all of this is being rolled out is costing the taxpayer?
Well, it's quite interesting because we're talking about a whole shadow economy here that people don't even know about, that they are really buying into without even knowing about it either. So, they use climate engagement strategists to help you have conversations about climate change. Now, not the science. They never discuss that. I've been listening to it today. They don't talk about the science of climate change.
No one's talking about
They talk
science.
about how you feel about it
Yes.
and how it's impacting your life and how you can tell everyone else about it. So basically, it's spreading a hive mind. That's all it is. It's spreading a consensus. So what this insidious organisation do is train the public to spout climate change propaganda and then assess how well they are doing. And you have this engagement, this climate engagement strategist talking to you on your webinar, and you get an appraisal as to how much you need to learn about the feelings and implementation of the climate change agenda. So that's it, really. The parasitic world of psychology will always find an illness.
Yeah.
And it's just found one. But yes, let's just see what they say. We might go over a bit tonight, like we did last week. It starts off on their website, the Climate Psychology Alliance. The first line of it is catastrophic anxiety. Have you ever had catastrophic anxiety?
No, can't say I have.
I mean, you get anxiety sometimes, don't you? But it's never been catastrophic.
So you're having anxiety about a catastrophe that might or might not happen.
Well, I think anxiety is catastrophic if you chuck yourself off a building or something like that. That'd be catastrophic, wouldn't it? But
Yeah, but are they saying that your anxiety is due to worrying about a catastrophe?
yeah, but it doesn't make sense the way they put it, does it?
No.
It would be catastrophe anxiety, wouldn't it? Right?
Yeah, it
but it's
would
not. They put catastrophic anxiety, so their English is terrible as well. Many people who seek therapeutic help are consumed by thoughts of impending disaster in their private lives. Okay, what's that got to do with the weather, though?
Exactly.
Right? The objects of such fearful ruminations are many imagined illnesses, setbacks and failures, social humiliations. But whatever the focus, the terror can be so intense that it is sometimes referred to as catastrophic anxiety. Oh, so this is a new term that the psychological world has made up on our behalf. The terror can be so intense that it's sometimes referred to as catastrophic anxiety, as the self literally feels as if it's falling apart and one's world is coming to an end. Well, wait a minute. No, they're thinking about they're thinking the world's going to come to an end.
Yes.
Now, I suppose if the world comes to an end, your world comes to an end as well. I suppose it makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. So now we have an illness in which can be used for those who believe in a created management system of catastrophism. Interesting. It's very interesting. So it says what we do. The Climate Psychology Alliance is a group for anyone interested in making connections between depth psychology. Now, I haven't heard anything of any depth come out of them at all.
What's depth psychology?
Well, I think it's going into the depths of your
Psyche.
Highly inactive brain, really. And climate change. Even though there's no connection. Psychotherapists form the bulk of our membership. Well, they would, wouldn't they? Because they want more work. But we welcome anyone who finds this perspective helpful. Well, we're finding it very helpful. But we're finding it very helpful to tell everyone not to find it helpful, really. So what is climate psychology? Climate change is not a... Now, get this. Think about this, what they're saying. Climate change is not a scientific problem waiting for a technical solution. No, it's about the weather systems of the planet, right? So that's a logical fallacy. It doesn't make any sense. It says it is an urgent, frightening, systemic problem involving environment, culture and politics. What's politics got to do with the weather? This is insanity. In fact, these people need counselling if they're going to put that on their website. There's something mentally wrong with them.
It's inciting mass neurosis and hysteria, and that's kind of what they want, and they're achieving it very successfully at the moment by pushing this agenda through, and this has to stop. It's diabolical.
As Greta says, we're not going to take it anymore.
We're not going to take it anymore, no.
It says,
in the words of St. Greta,
it engenders fear, denial and despair amongst individuals. No, that's what's implanted into individuals.
Yeah.
It's nothing. It doesn't engender that at all. Because if these people hadn't been told there was a climate emergency, then they wouldn't be anxious about it, would they? Because every day's different and the weather's all right. So that's rubbish. It engenders fear. No, you engender fear, denial, and despair amongst the people who you are psychologically programming. That's what happens. Evasion, indifference, and duplicity amongst the powerful. What? So they're making all of these politicised, propagandised statements on behalf of who? You know, basically, it says it forces uncomfortable dilemmas about justice, nature and equality into consciousness. What on earth are they talking about? These people are mentally ill. The Climate Psychology Alliance should be bloody sectioned, a lot of them in my opinion. It challenges all of us in modern societies, both personally and politically.
Yeah. Well, where did they get their funding from? Did you manage to have a look at that?
Well, the funding seems to come from these partner companies and organisations because they're all members of it. So this thing has been set up on the back of these organisations that they're all members of. And that's where it goes into even this storytelling thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting the way they've done it, because you've got these people who are the core members and they've got these little... They're all just trying to make money out of it. Then you've got these organisations we've talked about who are basically NGOs who are bankrolling the whole of the climate change agenda.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what's happening. It says, our core focus, however, is in psychosocial studies and the psychotherapy field, approaches which help us to understand the unconscious processes and emotions which control our thoughts. Well, basically, this is mind control then, isn't it? If they're trying to get into your subconscious and your unconscious thoughts, what's this got to do with the climate emergency? What's it got to do with it? You know.
And this is all foretold in the Psychological Society, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to have, Freudian repression is now weather. Do you know what I mean? What is that? Anxiety, guilt and shame make it very difficult for people to face the reality of climate change. What are they on about?
Well, because we are the polluters. We're the terrible people. And
Well, this is the benefits again. Yeah.
We have to pay for our original sin. We have to give up all our rights and freedoms.
But they're not saying anthropogenic climate change. They're just saying climate change. So they put anxiety, guilt and shame onto climate change, which just means the system of weather.
Yeah, I mean... Climate's always changed, and it's mainly to do with natural forces. So, yeah. So why should we have any guilt about that? Well,
they're telling you should. 5 key principles define our approach. Recognise our part in the problem. We've got to recognise our part in the problem and come to terms with it. Okay.
Well, it's about us, being forced into compliance to be controlled. I mean, that's all it is. It's mind control in order to march into the gulags. Yeah. Really.
To be part of the solution, we must first recognise we are part of the problem. No, you're part of the problem. You are the problem. Yeah. So we're not going to take it. As St. Greta said, we're not going to take it.
We're not going to take it.
It says part of the CPA's work is to challenge the cultural norms of privilege and resentment. Oh, can you get your head around this?
Please.
This is absolute psychological subversion. You're a vile organisation. We detest you. And we're going to do everything we can to expose you and your horrible little storytelling people, okay? So we're not going to take it. Our house is on fire, and you've stolen my future.
Yes.
You've stolen my future. How do you feel about that? Well, I'll tell you what. If you are concerned about our future, ladies and gentlemen, and you should be, we do have an appeal. We've finally got him on board. Yes, an appeal from Sir David.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Climate emergency. Only joking, it really has turned out nice again. This is Sir David Attenborough. For many years, I have supported globalist-backed organisations, NGOs, UN lobbyists and even the BBC. I have grovelled unashamedly and sold myself out for money and fame. But now I am supporting not only climate realism, truth and fact, but also windows on the world. I am asking for your help in this, the 6th mass extinction. Sorry, old habits die hard. This wonderful sunny day. The Earth is in a stable interglacial period, and yes, it really has turned out nice again. Windows on the World works tirelessly with little support and, unlike the BBC, no funding whatsoever. I, David Actabor, now a reformed catastrophist, would like to take this opportunity to ask you, the valued listener, to help Windows on the World. Yes, to help keep the show on the road, and indeed the airwaves, do please consider making a small and even regular contribution through the PayPal button on the homepage at windowsontheworld.net.
That was very good, David. If you weren't such a proven liar, I would believe you are really supporting our work. But something tells me you're...
Please, can you untie me? I won't do any more propaganda for the BBC. I promise. I won't tell any more lies.
Well, David, not yet. We need you to make a few more confessions. Remember that me, Greta Thunderbird, and my puppet sister never forgive, never forget.
Can I still do my after-dinner work?
No.
Can I please increase my carbon footprint by flying to a nice sunny place?
No.
Oh, go on.
That's it from Climate Matters with me, Greta Thunderbird. Please help Windows on the World.
Oh, can you untie me so I can have a biscuit?
No.
Oh.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
We finally got him on board. I can't believe it. It's just great,
Fantastic.
isn't it?
No, he's done it.
It took a bit of persuasion.
He's done a 360 turn. It's amazing.
He has. We didn't prompt him to do it.
No, we didn't.
We had nothing to do with that whatsoever, boys and girls. But we do need help, and if you can help us, do go to the donate button on Windows on the World homepage. It does help us get around the country, and of course, we are sacrificing ourselves on the climate emergency for you. In addition, it says here on this website, just to finish off, to the more obviously radical task of eliminating greenhouse gases. Now, we're going to get down to the point of this, right?
Yeah.
In addition to the more obviously radical task of eliminating greenhouse gases from the global economy. Wait a minute, how can greenhouse gases be eradicated from the global economy?
No, it's two different things.
It's two different things. These people need help. They are mentally enfeebled. It says the CPA, the Climate Psychology Association, right, believes in challenging the consumerist paradigm that includes the notion that human beings are somehow superior to and separate from nature. And that's a totally different thing, right? So what they're doing now is saying, if you don't believe in man-made global warming and have climate anxiety, then you are separate from nature.
Yeah.
Disgusting, absolute subversion
awful stuff.
So we're going to sign off in a minute. Have you got anything to say about that, Sandy? Because I know I'm talking about it quite a bit.
Well, and it's just I'm just speechless about the depths to which this is going at the moment, and how desperate they are actually, because they've failed to implement any of this into law until we sign the Climate Change Act. And the thing is that Britain is the only country to have actually put that into law. Every other country hasn't. They've tried to get it through in treaties in all these different conferences that they've had over since 1992. And this, at the moment, is desperate measures to push it through. Yeah. And we in the UK are the ones that are literally like the sacrificial lambs, because you won't find anyone going to the depths of compliance the way that we are in the UK. And we really have to realise that most countries aren't buying into this. Most countries in Europe are not buying into this, but we are. Why? We have to ask ourselves why. And are we just more compliant? What's going on? Or is the propaganda being fed to us on such a huge scale that we're just being blinded by it all?
Well, it's the most controlled kind of system on the planet, really. The way that the British are controlled, it's much worse than any communist regime, because people in this country believe that they live in a democracy.
Yeah, that's the
and that's the problem. Yeah.
And they do appeal to authority the whole time. They like children, really. Nobody thinks of themselves. Whereas in other parts of Europe, they've had struggles with communist regimes and with other regimes, sort of juntas and goodness knows what. And so they actually can see what's going on and they think for themselves. They seem to be more autonomous.
Yes.
For some reason. But anyway. So we carry on. We carry on the fight and the sword of truth.
And there is more on that website. Have a read of it. They then go into the Earth as a living being and all of James Lovelock stuff. And then
has also done a 360 turn.
Yes, but they don't say that.
Well, almost.
They don't say that. No. The analytic view, it says, is that this is an attack on the mother who has nurtured our species, but whom we now, in our modern technological triumph, resent for our feelings of dependence. So they're bringing in Freud and his perversion about things there to actually attack the idea of independence within your own mind if you're outside of the controlled hive mind of neurosis, which has nothing to do with appreciating nature. No. So all those people who've got climate anxiety, you're going against nature. Go with it. Appreciate what you have. And that's probably it for this week.
Yes.
We've gone over again. But it's turned out nice.
Hasn't it?
All right then. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week on Windows on the World. Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net.